Hey everybody! Today on this episode I really want to talk about what makes about a few just really great books. Now before I go into detail about a couple of these great books, I kind of want to define what I mean by a great book. Now some people could say a great book is simply just a really good story, just a book that really had some great information. And those definitely are things that I think characterize a very good book, whether that is fiction, nonfiction, or whatever it might be. But I think what really defines a great book from a good book is how it presents the information and what it does to you when you are done reading it. For example, one good book that a lot of people will recommend is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a great book and I've read it myself, but for me it wasn't really a great book. It had some great information that I felt was useful, but it just didn't have the same qualities that a lot of other books had. Now, what are those qualities that I'm talking about? Well, for me, personally, when I read a great book, as opposed to just a good book, it's a book that its content influences my life in a greater way. I have to stop and I have to think very deeply about the material that's being presented. Not that I actually really have to think about those things, but it's more so that the book presents it in a way that just makes me want to ponder it throughout the day and makes me write questions, makes me go out and research more. And often what I find as I read these kinds of books, that I'm not just reading it in the book itself, but I find articles that talks about it, whether it's in that moment or a few weeks later on, and it becomes an enriching experience while reading it. Another thing that defines, I think, great books from good books is that a great book is almost spiritual in nature. And what I mean by that is not necessarily like religious, as like the Bible or the Quran or anything, or the Tao Te Ching, but more so in that it speaks to me in a way that is very personal about my life and about who I am as an individual, and makes me really think regarding my own behavior and my ethics and my morals. So now that we've kind of defined what makes a great book besides just a good book, let me introduce to you some of those great books that have really influenced in my life that I highly recommend that everyone should read at some point in their life. Now, you'll probably find on Google a huge list of recommended books that people will put on there, and this is just my list of books that I guess that I just more than recommend, that I actually really recommend that you absorb the information that is contained in there, and expand on the ideas that are presented. Without further ado, let's get into some of these great books that I've been talking to you a little bit about. First book here is Code of the Extraordinary Mind. This was written by Vishen Lakhiani, founder of a company called Mindvalley. And essentially what Vishen is talking about in this book is that there are cultural rules that we have established in our life, that have been established throughout either tradition, or it might be just old ideas or patterns. And what Vishen really describes here is that we don't have to hold on to these old ideas and these old way of thinking. And so what he recommends is that we kind of essentially move past these old limiting beliefs that we've had for so long. One example of this that Vishen has is the belief that you have, if you want to be happy and you want to make money, you have to go to college. What he kind of expands upon isn't necessarily that point of itself, but the idea that there are many of these different beliefs and many of these different ideologies that are just outdated. And many of us walk around with these limiting beliefs that limit our ability to go forth and actually be happy, to do things that will make us have a fulfilling life. This book also is very well coupled with his I think it's a 14-week program that goes through different aspects of your life, and you learn different things and you kind of go through the book. If you can't pay for the $200 fee to get the course, there's a free video online that has just kind of goes through some of the basic ideas that's presented in this book, but and I think it suffices for just to get you a good idea. The next book that I want to talk to you about is Greg McKeown's Essentialism. Essentialism is essentially the idea that there are many things in this world that are very important. But what Greg McKeown kind of presents in his book is that there are very little things that are essential. There are many things that we could spend our time on, there are many things that we could go and do, but there are very few things that we actually should be putting full effort into. For example, your family is one, and to spend time with your family is something that is essential in your life, but maybe not necessarily being with your family traveling the world. It's not something that's essential, but it's definitely something that could be important to you. A more concrete example would be that there are many things that can take our time away, such as projects need to be done, deadlines that need to be, meetings that need to be done, but we should not neglect the things that are truly essential in our life. One example that Greg gives in his book is that sleep is essential to our function and well-being, and that we should be taking time to get enough sleep during the night. And in fact, he even goes in to say that we should take time to take naps throughout the day. Now, I'm sure that your employer doesn't necessarily have a break room that has a napping place, unless you're Google and then there's an entire room where you could essentially take a nap. The point is, though, is that we should be spending our time doing things that are not just important, but essential. The next book that really changed my perspective regarding not just money, but my life in general has been Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I actually saw my dad reading this a couple years ago, and he was reading it, it seemed like for quite a while. And then a few years later, just last year, I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and saying that it was about how we need to be kind of educated in that manner of the same kind of things that are talked about in this book. So I called up my dad, I asked him to send it to me just to borrow, and he willingly gave it to me. And not only was it just a good read, but it really sparked and changed my perspective of how I view money and how I spend my money. What it kind of goes back to is maybe just to build off of what essentialism was, is that your money should be put into places where it can do more than just be spent. Essentially, what Robert Kiyosaki says, and can be explained much better in his book than I could, is that we have to think about money in terms of what it can do rather than how we can make more money. Another way of saying that is make your money work for you rather than sacrificing your time for money. And also, when you make big purchasing decisions, think about all that goes into that purchasing decision. For example, owning a home is much more than just buying a house. A lot of people have this idea that once you buy a house, it's some kind of investment. Go back a few years to the housing crash of 2008, and you can see easily how a house is a very big liability, especially if you're getting a mortgage on it. The idea has actually kind of sparked in my mind that instead of going out and getting a mortgage for a home as soon as I can possibly afford one just to save money, that possibly renting an apartment or even renting a home can in the long run be beneficial in that, well, I don't have to invest the time and the effort to maintain it. This book also goes really well with the documentary Minimalism, and I highly recommend that you go watch that and check out their website as well, and their books and all other stuff. This is a great idea. Minimalism, just kind of a quick idea, essentially just making sure that you live in a space and you spend your money on things that as little as possible. Kind of goes back to essentialism, which I think really ties together well. The last nonfiction book that I really wanted to get into that honestly really changed my life forever is Stephen R. Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The reason why I love this book so much, and I would literally recommend everybody should read this book. All the others, I definitely think that they're good things that you should read and definitely look into, but you can find them in blog posts and great videos. But 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is a book that it needs to be read. And why I say you need to read it is because much of the self-help world and much of what we're taught doesn't seem to really teach us about how do we go about making decisions and how do we go about doing things. And what Stephen R. Covey proposes in this book is basically these 7 habits that will make us more effective and make us more successful in the things we do. The last book I want to recommend to you is a nonfiction book called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This book, it was introduced to me by my wife, who was taking essentially it was a literature for the soul class in college. She kept it because she loved it so much, and she kept it around the house, and eventually I picked it up and read it, and just a great, like I said, a great book. Now, to kind of a brief synopsis of what this book is about, essentially is about a traveler from Spain who goes to Egypt looking for treasure within the pyramids. Essentially what he finds out, and I won't spoil it for you, is that his journey wasn't, the journey that to get to the pyramids wasn't actually about the destination, but it was actually about his journey in progressing and becoming someone that was worthy of this treasure at the end. I think that it's kind of the case for a lot of us in some ways, that there is something out there that is something for us. It may not necessarily be a big achievement like discovering the pyramids or reaching some hidden treasure, but it might be something as small as being a good parent, being a good worker, whatever it might be. Those are small things that are along our journey that we need to take into account. There is something big, I use quotations, out there for all of us. And we just need to go ahead and make that journey towards whatever it might be. Thank you for watching this video. Please hit that subscribe button below if you enjoyed it. And also, please leave in the comments a message on what do you think is a great book? And what are some of those great books that you have read? I enjoy it when we can exchange books and ideas with together, so please leave a link if you can, and I look forward to hearing from you guys soon. Thanks.